Job 21. Pat's not here.
He's with the sister.
No. We're only going to do 2 chapters today, so I'll let y'all out of school a little early. As long as I don't get interrupted by Alexis.
Watch your thumbs around
Yeah.
here.
So, anyway. Page 809. Oh, man. Dang. All right.
755.
Look at everybody. All right. Job 21. Now, Job 21 is Job's second reply back to Zophar. So last week we had Zophar speak there in chapter 20. And so chapter 21 is Job's reply back to what Zophar had levied in chapter 20. But before we start chapter 21, I want to remind you of what Job said there in chapter 19, verse 25, where he says, "For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth." I want to remind everybody about how Adam Clark had said from that point forward, Job never really uttered an accusation against God like he was prior. That he perhaps from that statement came to realization that he was in God's hands and God was going to do what he wanted, and that God was sustaining Job. And so from that point forward, we really don't see Job saying anything callous, I suppose is the word I can use, towards God. So we're going to see that played out here in chapter 21 as Job replies back this second time to Zophar. And then next week, we'll be in chapter 23 and 24, and we'll see that same attitude played out by Job when he talks to Eliphaz. But I'm only going to do 2 chapters today because chapter 23 and 24 is all one long narrative, and I didn't want to break it up, so I wanted to make sure to do both of those chapters in one setting. So we're just going to do the 2 chapters today, and you'll have to figure out how to spend your time that we allot afterwards. So anyway, that being said, I do have a thing to read here about chapter 21 and about what we had talked about last week with Job, perhaps changing his attitude. This chapter, Job 21, may be called Job's triumph over the insinuated calumnies and specious but false doctrines of his opponents. Now, I didn't ever know the word calumnies. Calumnies, does everybody know what the word calumnies means? All right. That's malicious statements. So, this chapter may be called Job's triumph over the malicious statements and specious but false doctrines. Anybody know what the word specious means? Specious means an argument, claim, or reasoning that appears true, plausible, or attractive on the surface, but is actually wrong, false, or illogical. I have a lot of examples in current news cycles that I could point to on that. I'm going to mention them. Anyway, see me after church. So, his friends are all given these false accusations that appear to be plausible and true, but we know from what we read about Job in chapter 1 that Job was a righteous man. We know that what his friends are saying is not true. So that's what Adam Clark here is getting at, is this chapter 21 is Job's triumph over these accusations that were false against him. The irritability of his temper no longer appears. And I think we can see that throughout the times that Job is speaking, he's pretty irritated at God and at his 3 pals. From the time he got that glorious discovery of his Redeemer in Job 19:25 that we talked about last week, and the joyous hope of an eternal inheritance, we find no more murmurings nor unsanctified complainings. He is now full master of himself and reasons conclusively because he reasons coolly. So that is Adam Clark speaking about Job in chapter 21. So, and again, we do see this attitude change because of what he finally acknowledges there in chapter 19. Now, again, he does have a few other high moments there. Chapter 13, verse 15, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. I mean, we see that played out. And there seems like there was one other place, but I don't seem to have it highlighted right now. But nevertheless, from that chapter 19, verse 25, we do see a change in Job. And I think I've got, okay, that's it. So anyway, kind of in your mind, think about that as we read these words of Job here in chapter 21 and see if you can't notice some type of attitude changed in Job. Now, again, this is his reply back to Zophar that we read last week, but understand he is not necessarily at this point addressing God the way he was in prior chapters. You know, he would in prior chapters address his friend and God and perhaps accuse both of them for doing wrong to him, but now we don't see that played out in Job chapter 21. So hopefully we can see that. So anyway, that being said, chapter 21.
Job 21. But Job answered and said, Hear diligently my speech, and let this be your consolations. Suffer me that I may speak, and after that I have spoken, mock on. As for me, is my complaint to man? And if it were so, why should not my spirit be troubled? Mock me, and be astonished, and lay your hand upon your mouth. Even when I remember, I am afraid, and trembling taketh hold on my flesh.
You know, all of these men, Job included, they have seemed up to this point to be talking over each other. They'll make an accusation toward Job. Job will reply back to the friend or to God or a mixture of both. And they never seem to actually be hearing what the other guy is saying. However, Job is saying here, you are not listening to me. And he says there in verse 3, suffer me that I may speak, and after I've spoken, then you can go ahead and mock me. But my complaint is not toward man, because he knows that there was no man that has brought these calamities upon himself, or upon him. So his complaint is not toward his friends, and his friends caused all these problems. His complaint was toward God, and why is this happening? Now again, remember, Scripture has told us that at no time did Job ever curse God. Now I will make a contention perhaps that he came awfully close a few times, but he's understanding that, or he's trying to get to his friends, I'm not blaming you guys for my calamity. And so since I'm not blaming man, why do you care? Why are you still fighting against me? Now I think the friends will say, well, because you've sinned against God and you've got deep secret sin you're not confessing. That was their contention all along. But Job here is saying, you're not listening to me. I want you to listen, and then you can go ahead and mock me. But again, the things are beginning to change. And actually, after, I think, chapter 26, we don't hear any more about these three guys. So they're going to either go away or just shut up, one or the other. But anyway, Job is saying here, just be quiet for a little bit. Just listen to me. Verse 6 or 7, I don't remember where I stopped. 7.
Wherefore do the wicked live, become old, yea, are mighty in power? Their seed is established in their sight with them, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull gendereth and faileth not. Their cow calveth, and casteth not her calf. They send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They take the timbrel and harp, and rejoice at the sound of the organ. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave. Therefore they say unto God, Depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of thy ways.
So Job is countering the claim that God destroys the wicked. Now, I say that to say that he does, but not in our time frame. And Job says here, the wicked live, they become old, they're mighty. A lot of the people that are in power are wicked. Their seed is established, in other words, they have children and grandchildren. Their houses are safe from fear. It just seems like God is not punishing them. It says there in verse 9. Their bulls, they sire calves. The calves, they birth. They have cattle. Their children go out like a flock, and they don't have a care. They dance and they play, and they dance with the timbrel and the organ. They spend their days in wealth and perhaps luxury in some ways, but in a moment they go down to the grave. So at some point, it does end. So Job is saying, whether they're wicked or righteous, God blesses everyone in some way, shape, or form. Now, I've always used the analogy of a farmer. You have a farmer that's a Christian and serves the Lord and loves God, and you have a farmer that cares nothing about God. They both get a good crop. The Christian thanks the Lord for the great crop, and the farmer that's not a Christian says, boy, look at what a good farmer I am. But the moment they have a bad crop, the Christian thanks the Lord for what he has and trusts the Lord for a good crop next year, and the heathen blames God for not having a good crop. We see the difference here. But God, in the good times, gives good crops to both farmers. And that's kind of what Job is saying here. We're both blessed by God, and in a moment, we go to the grave. Verse 14. Oh, really? Okay. I'm off by a verse today. I don't know. I need, anyway. 15, I guess.
What is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit should we have if we pray unto him? Lo, their good is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. How oft is the candle of the wicked put out, and how oft cometh their destruction upon them? God distributeth sorrows in his anger. They are as stubble before the wind, and as chaff that the storm carrieth away. God layeth up his iniquity for his children. He rewardeth him, and he shall know it. His eyes shall see his destruction, and he shall drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what pleasure hath he in his house after him, when the number of his months is cut off in the midst? Shall any teach God knowledge, seeing he judgeth those that are high? One dieth in his full strength, being wholly at ease and quiet.
I want to say this is, I should have probably mentioned this before. This is Job talking about how God deals with the wicked, okay? And let's see, where was it? The term his children is not talking about God's children, but the wicked's children. There in verse 19, God layeth up his iniquity for his children. That's the wicked's children, all right? The children of wicked men, sadly, suffer because of the wickedness of the fathers. All right, so that's that. I wanted to clarify that God, or that Job is talking about God dealing with the wicked here. Sorry.
His breasts are full of milk, and his bones are moistened with marrow. And another dieth in the bitterness of his soul, and never eateth with pleasure. They shall lie down alike in the dust, and the worms shall cover them.
In verse 24, his breasts are full of milk. Now, we understand that men don't have breasts with milk. This is talking about pails or buckets. His cows are producing milk, so it's a metaphor there. But understand that's what that's talking about. Another dies in his bitterness of soul. So you got wicked people that die when they're high on the hog, and we got wicked people that die when they're low. And it's the same way with Christians. Christians some are well taken care of and live high on the hog, so to speak, while others barely scrape to get by. That's the way life is. But God is faithful to his children. And so whether you're a Christian that is living high on the hog or is barely scraping by, the Lord is blessing you. And I think that Christians, regardless of what they have, understand that God is taking care of them. Now, I do want us to remember, let's flip over, and we're not going to read it, obviously, but let's turn to Psalm 73. I want to point something out here in Psalm 73. We've referenced this a time or two. Psalm 73. Now, this is a psalm of Asaph. And I want to read just a couple verses here. Verse 3. For I was envious at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. And again, I've referenced this. We can look at wicked people and know they're wicked and don't serve the Lord, and then sometimes be jealous or envious of what they have and how they have and we don't. We can get that way. Verse 4, for there are no bands in their death, and their strength is firm. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. We can look at wicked people and think, boy, they don't have it nearly as rough as I do, and I serve the Lord. It says there in verse 6, therefore pride compassed them as a chain, violence covered them as a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness, and they have more than heart could wish. They got garages and barns full of toys and equipment and things to enjoy life. They got a big boat and I can't think of the things that you ride on the water. What are they?
Jet ski.
Yeah, jet ski. Thank you. They got everything they can spend. They got campers and all this. They can go do whatever they want when they want. There's no fear of God in their eyes. But verse 16, when I thought to know the verse 17, until I went into the sanctuary of God, then understood I therein. Surely thou didst set them in slippery places. Thou castest them down into destruction. So we can be envious and jealous of wicked people, but the Lord we should be open to the Lord opening our eyes to understand their end and what the Lord will dole out to them in the end if they don't trust Christ. And in much the same way here in chapter 21 of Job, the wicked never seem to suffer calamity the way Job did. What is the ultimate end of the wicked and those that know the Lord? That's what it all boils down to. The ultimate end, not what we are on earth, but the ultimate end. So understand as you read chapter 21 and reference that and think about Psalm 73 and understand the ultimate end for the wicked. God will deal with men in his time. I know we want it to be done right now, but that's not how God works sometimes. Back to Job 21 now. We'll finish the chapter. Verse 28.
Behold, I know your
27.
And the devices which ye wrongfully imagine against me. For ye say, where is the house of the prince? And where are the dwelling places of the wicked? Have ye not asked them that go by the way? And do ye not know their tokens? That the wicked is reserved to the day of destruction?
There they are, right there.
They shall be brought forth to the day of wrath. Who shall declare his way to his face? And who shall repay him what he hath done? Yet shall he be brought to the grave, and shall remain in the tomb. The clods of the valley shall be sweet unto him, and every man shall draw after him, as there are innumerable before him. How then comfort ye me in vain, seeing in your answers there remaineth falsehood?
All right, so the wicked are going to die. It says there in verse 30, the wicked is reserved to the day of destruction. Job is beginning to understand that the wicked will be destroyed. Now, in through all this, chapter 21, we don't see Job blaming God for anything. He's addressing what Zophar had said in chapter 20. So I hope we can see that attitude change in Job as we just read that. Any comments or questions on 21? Yes. Well, we talked about that. I think last week maybe we talked about Job having other kids. I don't remember now. Anyway, I'm not for sure whether. My guess would be yes, because they were all gathered in the oldest son's house when they all died, and so my guess is yes. And I had another thought. Before Ron interrupted. What was I going to say? Oh, rats. Oh, well. Not your fault, Ron. I did have another thought, though. I did, yes. It's not his fault. I just wanted to blame somebody. Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah. Well, I thought I had a good thought there, too. But anyway, hopefully we can see the attitude change here in Job. I guess we'll go to chapter 22. Maybe it'll occur to me what I was going to say. Are you all right? Yeah. We used to always say if you sneeze 3 times in a row, you can go home. Yeah. Well, what was I going to say? Well, it don't matter, I guess. Well, it may not have been important, but it was a good thought. Now, and it's funny. Why can you can remember? Oh, I was going to say something, but you can't remember what it is you're going to say. How does your brain work like that?
Or not work.
Yeah, or not work. Yeah. Oh well. Enough with this. Job chapter 22. Now this is Eliphaz's third speech. This is Job's third friend. Now if I've mentioned this before, I don't remember, but we will have a fourth friend show up here in a little while. But he's not spoke yet. Perhaps he's not on the scene yet. I don't know. But yeah, I'm trying to think of his name. Bildad, I think. Elihu. He shows up in chapter 32, so we'll get there in a couple of weeks. But this is Eliphaz's third speech or third accusation toward Job. And again, Job's reply to Eliphaz is going to be chapter 23 and 24, so we're not going to, I think it's too long. We're not going to have enough time to finish it, and I didn't want to leave that hanging. So anyway, chapter 22. I do think I have something to read here. Maybe that's what it was. I was going to have something to read. Job 22. Jameson and Brown. Hang on just a second here. All right. Scroll through that. All right. Eliphaz shows that man's goodness does not add to or man's badness take from the happiness of God. Therefore, it cannot be that God sends prosperity to some and calamities to others for his own advantage. And so what Eliphaz is insinuating here is everybody just lives their life, and God has no interest in the affairs of man. This is what Eliphaz says. The cause of the goods and ill sent must lie in the men themselves. So it's your fault that you have calamities, or it's your fault that you have prosperity. This is what Eliphaz is saying. So Job's calamities must arise from his guilt. Eliphaz, instead of meeting the facts of the situation, tries to show that it could not be so. So again, and this I think this sums up all of the accusations against Job. Again, it's your fault, Job. I saw something, was it this week, said a lot of the mistakes or a lot of the problems you have in your life is because you're stupid. I'm like, well, yeah, I guess that may be so, but God does delve into the affairs of men. All right, God is sovereign over all, and if He's sovereign over all, He's in control of everything. Now, we may not understand that fully, but understand, even here, God allowed Satan to attack Job, and so Job is going through this because God allowed it to happen. And again, ultimately for His glory, because here we are 4,000 years later talking about it. All right? And God will get the glory in the later chapters. But again, at no time has Job ever cursed God through all of this. Oh, that's what I wanted. Ta-da! I want to remind everybody of what we kind of talked about last week, how Job was not afflicted in his voice in Satan's hoping that that Job would curse God. And I was thinking of Kay, because Kay had mentioned that it seemed like Job was doing a lot of talking, and we talked last week about how perhaps Satan did not touch his voice so as to be able to curse God at some point. So, see, y'all should have been here last week because that was for you. But that's what my thought was. I remember now. So anyway, yeah, yes, yeah. I wanted to tell you that because that's what we talked about some last week. Well, there you go. But God did tell Satan he could touch him, but don't take his life. So God did not keep that restriction away from Satan. But that's a good thought, Daniel. Anyway, chapter 22. I feel better knowing I had that thought come back. I would have probably woke up at 2 this morning and laid there thinking, well, who am I going to tell? Then I'd have woke up Tammy to tell her. And
That would not have been good. You should just call Kay.
Oh, yeah, I'll call Kay. Yeah. Well, yeah, your mom out. She's like, how did I miss 3 phone calls?
Yeah.
We don't know. Anyway, verse 1 of chapter 22.
Job 22. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, Can a man be profitable unto God, as he that is wise may be profitable unto himself? Is it any pleasure to the Almighty that thou art righteous, or is it gain to him that thou makest thy ways perfect?
Notice the Eliphaz here. What does God care? I mean, what can you offer to God to help him? Can you be profitable or helpful to God? And again, verse 3, what pleasure does God take in you giving a sacrifice, Job, or living your life in a clean way? No, just notice that attitude Eliphaz has. Verse 4.
Will he reprove thee for fear of thee? Will he enter with thee into judgment? Is not thy wickedness great, and thine iniquities infinite? For thou hast taken a pledge from thy brother for naught, and stripped the naked of their clothing. Thou hast not given water to the weary to drink, and thou hast withholden bread from the hungry. But as for the mighty man, he had the earth, and the honorable man dwelt in it. Thou hast sent widows away empty, and the arms of the fatherless have been broken.
So Eliphaz is accusing Job of not having any hospitality toward the stranger, the people that are weary or need of drink, or someone that is hungry. He's accusing Job of keeping the stuff for himself, when, if I'm not mistaken, I think that Job has talked about in the past how he was helping others. Well, he did, yeah. But he's saying prior to this, apparently, when you had stuff, you weren't offering it to help anybody, and I think that's a complete falsehood on Eliphaz's part here. You've sent widows away empty, and you've turned away the orphans. Verse 10.
Therefore snares are round about thee, and sudden fear troubleth thee. Or darkness that thou canst not see, and abundance of waters cover thee. Is not God in the height of heaven? And behold the height of the stars, how high they are? And thou sayest, how doth God know? Can he judge through the dark cloud?
Here Eliphaz is saying, God is way up high, and the clouds cover. God can't even see what you're doing, Job. Now we're really limiting God on what he can do. Here Eliphaz is even accusing God of not being able to see through the clouds. Mercy.
Thick clouds are a covering to him, that he seeth not, and he walketh in the circuit of heaven. Hast thou marked the old way which wicked men have trodden, which were cut down out of time, whose foundation was overflown with a flood, which said unto God, Depart from us, and what can the Almighty do for them? Yet he filled their houses with good things. But the counsel of the wicked is far from me. The righteous see it and are glad, and the innocent laugh them to scorn. Whereas our substance is not cut down, but the remnant of them the fire consumeth. Acquaint now thyself with him, and be at peace. Thereby good shall come unto thee.
So he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. God can't see because all these thick clouds, he's way up in the air. He can't see or care about what you're doing. But then he turns around in verse 21, and acquaint yourself with him, and be at peace. So good shall come to thee. Again, I had said a few weeks ago, we can't necessarily take these verses in Job as good theology. Well, it says in the Bible, well, it does say in the Bible, but we need to understand the context here. And if you would read in verse, just go back to verse 12 through 14. If you read that without knowing the context, you would think that God wasn't able to see men and what they do, and God doesn't care about what men do, or that the thick clouds cover the earth so that God can't see. So we can't go to Scripture of Job sometimes and say, here, see, look at this is what the Bible says, because the context isn't what you're wanting it to be. And again, I'm not accusing us of doing that here, but generally speaking, we have to understand what is going on with the context before we can actually take it for truth, because this wasn't true here. So even though it's in Scripture, it's not true. Hope everybody understands what I'm saying here. Okay. Verse 21, I think. 22.
Receive, I pray thee, the law from his mouth, and lay up his words in thine heart. If thou return to the Almighty, thou shalt be built up. Thou shalt put away iniquity far from thy tabernacles. Then shalt thou lay up gold as dust, and the gold of Ophir as the stones of the brooks.
So Eliphaz says, if you turn back to God, you'll be built up. You'll have iniquity far from your houses. You'll lay up gold like dust. Now, how would you like for all the dust in your house to be gold? We would probably be dusting our houses a lot more, gathering it up. The gold of Ophir. So Ophir was a city or an area that was known for their fine, pure gold, or purer gold than others. but the ancients knew where it was at. But in our day today, we don't know where Ophir was really at. But the people of Job's days knew that the gold of Ophir was good gold. So not only will you have gold like dust that's just laying around everywhere, but you'll have the gold. You'll have this pure gold from Ophir that are like stones or gravel in the brooks. If you only turn back to God, who doesn't meddle in the affairs of men, this is what Eliphaz said. So you'd think, how's this going to work, Eliphaz? If he doesn't meddle in the affairs of man, how can I, if I serve him, he's going to bless me if he doesn't care what I do? Yeah, he's up in the thick clouds. He can't see anyway. Anyway, some pal Eliphaz is. Verse 25.
Yea, the Almighty shall be thy defense, and thou shalt have plenty of silver, for then shalt thou have thy delight in the Almighty, and shalt lift up thy face unto God. Thou shalt make thy prayer unto him, and he shall hear thee, and thou shalt pay thy vows. Thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee, and the light shall shine upon thy ways. When men are cast down, then thou shalt say, There is lifting up, and he shall save the humble person. He shall deliver the island of the innocent, and it is delivered by the pureness of thine hands.
So poor old Eliphaz says God can't meddle in men's affairs, but then if you turn to him, he'll bless you. We know all that to be a falsehood. So